Today we will talk about who is a D&D Virgin, and a fantastic comic book from Dark Horse, and finally, exciting Marvel card series from 1992. So let's dive right in. Right off the bat, I need to thank you very much for listening to my podcast. I appreciate the time you give me. I know there's lots of other things you could be doing with your time, but you chose to give me your ear. So again, thank you. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, there, I said it. All these years, and I haven't taken the time to do it. And there really isn't an excuse. I've had time to play it, I just haven't done it for whatever reason. I had the interest, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Mark A. Nelson, who is an artist, in fact, he did some artwork for TSR, who owned Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s. And he was invited to play D&D in the late 80s when he was doing the artwork for them. He started playing, and his character was killed after 2 rolls. And he didn't play again for almost another 25 years. Kind of funny, since the guy who's doing the art for them took so long to play, but he eventually did. And I'm at the point in my life where I want to try new things, like D&D. One of those things on my bucket list, I guess you could say. This podcast is something new. I've never done it before, but I wanted to try it. Trying new comics is something new too. I stuck to mainly Marvel and DC, but now I'm straying into other titles, and we'll get into that later. Now back to D&D. When I was a kid, and D&D was very popular in the early 80s, I couldn't play it. I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and this was the time of what they call the satanic panic of the 80s, when Christians viewed D&D as dancing with the devil, so to speak. There was the urban legend of the kid committing suicide because his D&D character died, and that was on the lips of every well-meaning parent everywhere in my circle. I wasn't allowed to play D&D even on video games, on the old ColecoVision, or watch the cartoon on Saturday mornings on CBS. However, I would sneak and watch the cartoon, and when I went to a friend's house, I would play the D&D video game anyway. The urge was there, and as I got older, the urge faded a little, but then I found HeroQuest, and my parents reluctantly let me play it and buy it. HeroQuest had a lot of similarities to Dungeons & Dragons, but it's a much more basic game. However, it was enough to satisfy my RPG urge. Then, life just kept happening. I went to high school, got to college, never really got around to it. Got married, had kids, and the next thing you know, I'm 44 and I'm a D&D virgin. Having kids and a job and family obligations can limit some of these things, but there's always times for the things you truly want. I just have to put down my phone, stop scrolling through Twitter and Facebook, or close my laptop, quit watching Netflix. There you have it. I'm trying something I have been meaning to do for 35 years. I'll give it a shot here real soon. I'll let you know how it goes. So the lesson here is you're never too late to try something new. Whether it's D&D, whether it's podcasting, whether it's fishing, whether it's a sport, whatever it is, give it a try. Because, just like the 80s commercials say, the more you know, the more you'll grow. Next, I want you to head over to that long box, grab a comic, gently untape the bag without tearing the bag, remove the comic from the bag, and enjoy. Because it's Comic Corner time. And today's comic is Black Hammer from Dark Horse. For some reason, over the last year, I've been more drawn towards the independent publishers rather than the big two, Marvel and DC. Now, don't get me wrong, I still like my Marvel. My first comics were Marvel, so I still have a soft spot for them. The big two have large readerships and a long history of characters they can pull from. For me, I think I'm curious about the obscure titles and something completely different from the mainstream to big publishers. Because independents have more freedom to tell a story. They can make as many issues or as few issues as they need to tell that story. They aren't beholden to an editor for what they want to do. And today's no different. Like I said, Black Hammer is another independent comic from Dark Horse. A new story. Black Hammer is another great comic book gem from Dark Horse, and I'll read the solicit. This is a new story from the brain of Jeff Lemire, artist Dean Ormston, and Dave Stewart. Once they were heroes, but that age has long since passed. Banned from existence by a multiverse crisis, the old champions of Spiral City, Abraham Slam, Golden Girl, Colonel Weird, Madame Dragonfly, and Barbalian, now lead simple lives in a timeless farming town. Even as they try to find their way home, Trouble has a unique way of finding our heroes wherever they are. And like I said, the writer is Jeff Lemire, artist is Dean Ormston, and the colorist is Dave Stewart. This series is well drawn, well written, and each issue has you jumping between the past and the present of each hero. However, Jeff does a great job of moving so well between those times, and he teases enough with each page that you keep wanting to read more. With other titles moving between time and between characters, it can be frustrating and confusing. But Jeff somehow pulls it off. Going to the past of a character sometimes takes you into the retro campy 60s and 50s comics, but back to the present day to deal with trying to be a has-been superhero and the challenges that come with living in a small, confined, simple farm life. Each character has their own issues to deal with. For example, Golden Gale is a 50-something-year-old woman stuck in a 9-year-old body. The art, like I said, from Dean is fantastic. It has that gritty look old Dark Horse titles tended to have, like X or some of the Predator titles from the early 90s. So if you haven't read Black Hammer, I can't recommend it enough. You won't be disappointed. Marvel Series 3, 1992. During this year, there were over 205 trading cards, including the traditional 5 holograms. Each hologram was tinted a different color. For example, the Wolverine hologram was tinted blue, and the Hulk was, conveniently, tinted green. This series introduced new elements of design. Instead of having a Did You Know section on the back of each card like Series 1 and 2 did, Series 3 featured a quote from each character. Several new categories were also included, like team-up cards displaying interesting pairings of 2 particular characters, Cosmic Beans, cards showcasing the characters that hail from outer space, the Origin card category that focused on specific character origins, and Milestones, which emphasized events in the Marvel Universe. Limited edition factory tins were made. There was only about 10,000 were later sold that contained the full set of cards, as well as additional power ratings cards. Now, the hologram cards are, like I said, Hulk, Thing, Wolverine, Venom, and lastly, Ghost Rider. Since these cards were cut from one sheet, you could lay the cards next to each other in sequential order, and the backgrounds, it's kind of a spacey, planety background, would match up. I didn't notice this until several years after I got them when I happened to place several of them together, and I noticed that in the background. And this was the days before customizable card games were popular, but with Series 2 and, of course, Series 3, they introduced the power rating stats, which certainly sparked the idea of some sort of battle between the characters. You had different categories for like energy projection, intelligence, power, strength, and speed, and a few other categories. I remember coming up with some basic rules for certain cards, like Wolverine in Rage Mode could have a double strength and speed on one attack, but if he was attacked on his next turn, he would automatically lose 1 health point. Of course, you had the excitement of opening the packs to see if you had that hologram card, and that was always exciting. So I highly recommend you check these out. You can still buy these. You can get a complete set for only $30 on eBay. There's also a website that shows Series 1 through 5 that you can virtually look at and see the artwork and see these power stats that I was talking about and check them out. Lastly, I want to do a quick shout out for those that have engaged me on social media. The first one is Lee Bachma. He does some great art, and I'll include the link in the show notes. He has a Facebook page. Highly recommend you check him out. Also, Jamie and Bree over at the podcast called That One Time I Was Abducted by Aliens. They're funny and hilarious. Encourage you to check them out. And then a new podcast I found, Drinking at Bible Study, hosted by Joe and Brandy. It's a fun, insightful show. I highly recommend you check it out. They certainly showcase what I talked about in the last episode about focusing on the things they have in common. They have differing points of view on the world, but they still have a calm and civil discussion. I'll include the links in the show notes and you can check them out. Again, thank you so much for listening. covertnerd.net for all the ways you can contact me. Until next time.